It's
Hello.
showtime. Woo!
It is.
Hello. How are
Hel-
you?
I'm good. How are you, Ellie?
I am very well. Um, Let us get all set up. Can you hear me well?
I can.
Okay, perfect. Great. We're in. Um,
Perfect.
we can wait a minute or two as people kind of shuffle in.
All right.
Ideally, I think people are planning on joining us, which is great. Getting a little, yeah, there we go.
Got a little
It takes a
action
minute.
going.
Yeah, it takes a minute for the app to alert people that our live has started. So it's always nice to kind of just hang for a second. Um, well, this is a treat, and I see your avatar has been uh, edited
Altered.
in a very in a fantastic way. It's a true life representation, as close as
It
you can
is.
get
Yes.
with these. That's funny. That's great. Okay. Well, it is my absolute honor and privilege to be hosting this talk tonight. And, you know, Matt, I've followed you for several years on Instagram and obviously loved what I've seen. Um, and I know that we share tastes um, in many ways. Uh,
Definitely.
so, so this is definitely a treat for me to get to find out more about you, obviously to share with our listeners and kind of following a little bit more of your story and how you got into doing what you do and then what it is that you do, because it sounds like it's very uh, varied in,
It is.
yeah, and there's a lot of depth there. So I really want to just find out more. I think you're at such a place, it seems like in your career where you've got you're a lot of plates spinning and a lot of
Yes.
success in different places. So it's a great time, it feels like, to bring extra light to you.
Was
So
an
thank
honor to
you.
have my brain picked and
Oh,
my
great.
career picked. I love it.
Yeah,
Where would
fantastic.
you like to start?
Well,
How far back you want to go?
right. Well, I guess okay. So for anyone joining us, Matt sells vintage and is an archivist, and there's lots more that he'll tell us about what he has been up to. But we have a shared love of vintage, so I think that will lead the way. And so my first question, of course, is like, how did you develop your passion, and what were the seeds? You know?
I think the passion was found in a Goodwill in
Yeah.
southeastern Kentucky.
Awesome.
I was a freaky kid who always wanted clothes that were not available for purchase at the
Right.
time that I
Freaky
lived.
kid.
So
Okay.
I think I started with really crazy 70s polyester shirts from Goodwill and
Okay.
Salvation Army. And then,
That's great.
you just kind of filter through, and that was where the initial like bug hit me, and I love
Right.
finding old things and giving it a new life. So that's always
Yeah.
been consistent throughout my like development as a
Right.
who I am now.
Right. So you did all, like, obviously, to start, you were doing that kind of pouring over racks,
Yeah,
the experience
totally.
that I know and love. Um,
Yes.
and would you say, like, that's a pretty intense way of, curating, basically, because, like, for
Oh
some
yeah.
people, they encounter like a vintage store and that might be their first experience with vintage, apart from maybe something that one of their parents had that they loved that was old or whatever. But to go to like a vintage store that's already done that work for you is a different experience than being in, like, what I'd call like the wild, where there's a
Absolutely.
mix of like the
Yeah.
secondhand things um, and then more like true vintage. And I think that actually is probably a good distinction to make, because a lot of people don't understand the difference between like thrift or secondhand clothing and what makes something actually vintage. So
Right.
would you be able to, like, what do you qualify and
I
what
would
do you
say
think is like the proper definition for
40
vintage?
years is
40
qualified
years.
vintage. Yeah.
Oh,
I
wow.
would
Yeah.
say in our current world and retail world that we live
Yeah.
in, like 25 is vintage to
Right.
most people who are kind of coming up in the business now. So
Yeah.
it's there's a definite distinction like between, I mean, really, I think when I started, it was 70s and back was considered true
Right.
vintage.
Right.
Anything newer than that was definitely considered thrift. I think now 80s is starting to bridge that gap a bit, and there's
Uh-huh.
been that amount of time now, so that
Yeah.
it feels of a different era as
Right.
opposed to 10 years ago it felt retro and kind of funky and crazy, and now it almost feels relevant again.
Right. So like for instance, like for anyone that follows trend, um, who will be listening now or later, um,
Yeah,
you know, obviously like everyone I think has heard the phrase like fashion is cyclical. So it seems more clear, now than ever that the styles that we see on trend right now are actually just like direct repeats of the 90s and early aughts. And of course there's like
absolutely.
the maybe higher end influence that kind of trickles down into fast fashion, and we can get into that later. But like, uh, I think a lot of young people, it seems, or people that are new to buying vintage, consider like the '90s vintage. And
Yeah,
even for like what I sell when I do my story sales, for most people, buying anything that wasn't just released is like a little bit of a shock, I think, like
yeah,
for people that are not acclimated to buying things, and appreciating things that were from bygone eras. And
right.
I know that like Etsy has really changed the marketplace. Um, and I actually would love to hear what you think about that. Because their marker and even like Depop or different apps and like media, I don't know what you'd call them, platforms, right?
Yeah,
Or they give their own classifications. And so it's
yeah,
like the 90s is just now starting to be considered truly, um, and maybe even a little bit of the early aughts,
yeah,
um, which is crazy to think like, that the kids that are, I'm dating myself, I guess, but it's like if you're born in 2000, you can drink now. That's kind of insane.
yeah.
Um,
It's kind of scary.
and that means that everything before you were born is rearing its head, or it's heading towards vintage. But
Yeah,
um, yeah. Okay. So yeah, 40 years being true vintage. And then what would you say maybe 50s? I think I tend to view like the 50, maybe the 40s to the 70s as vintage. And I think then I
yes,
start to consider it antique. And I
yeah.
don't know if
I
that's
would
legitimate. Yeah, how would
I
you?
would say definitely 40s to 50s is becoming more antique side of things than
Oh, right.
just vintage. I think
Yeah. The
70s is
40s
so
specifically, right?
relevant with
Yeah.
what people wear today that
Right.
70s kind of has that crosshair that it can
Yeah.
it can be retro and cool, or it can
Mm-hmm.
be, strictly Studio 54, or
Yeah.
the tail end of Flower Power with like bright, crazy prints and maxi dresses. So
Right.
so
And there's
there's
a
a
lot of
lot of
that.
different elements. Yes,
Yeah. Like Gucci Spring is all really like
all
late 60s,
70s.
70s.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
it
Kind of
just
insane.
screams the moment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's fabulous, and it definitely has a nod to the vintage side of things.
Yeah.
But I do think definitely I would say 50s is now more of an antique category than a wearable category, if that makes sense.
Right. It does, because when I got like more seriously into vintage, like I started buying, I was really petite when I was like in my formative years, and then I had a huge growth spurt. Unimportant, but relevant because at the time that I was trying to keep up with trend, I couldn't fit into a lot of the contemporary sizes that my friends were wearing. And so I ended up shopping vintage and buying jeans from the 70s because they were extra, extra small. And
Yeah,
being like under 5 feet, it was like the only thing that I could find that made me feel like I was on trend. And
right.
so that was kind of my first love. Uh, but when I was in my early 20s and kind of the seeds for the Ladysmith were being planted, I got obsessed with wearing dresses, and the 50s and the 60s were like my mainstay,
Yeah,
because of those great silhouettes. But I had issues with a few garments when I was wearing them, like a beautiful like a Dupioni silk 50s dress, and I went to a house for my birthday and the seams split while I was
Mm-hmm.
eating dinner.
Yeah.
And that awakened me to like, okay, honey, like, it's wearable to some extent and you can get it
Right.
altered or
It's
tailor it and make it more modern, but there's some practicality to like the fabrics themselves or the
yeah.
threads themselves being um, finite in their wear. And
Yes.
that was a kind
It's
of a
standing room only in vintage
right,
should be the
right.
general rule of thumb for anything
Yeah,
50s,
yeah,
60s. Like, do not sit down.
right,
Don't, you
right.
know.
Don't test it with a ribeye, that's for
Right.
sure.
Yeah,
Right.
for
Yeah,
sure.
that was an early mistake. Um, well, awesome. So like, beyond shopping at Goodwill, like what was the next step for you in kind of honing this skill and like learning the history of these things?
The next step for me, it was kind of a like inverted route. I had no idea that there was a way you could make a living doing this or
Right.
how it fit into like the fashion industry as a whole. So when
Okay.
I moved to New York after I graduated university, and
Hmm.
I basically started my journey through different internships. I interned at Donna Karan, New York. It's a very sort of vintage nod brand. That was her approach in design. I did
Hmm.
more of the merchandising and retail merchandising part of it from the
Okay.
corporate standpoint. So I was
Okay.
kind of weaving my way through that. And then recession hit in 2006, I think was when the bottom fell out the last time.
Right.
Um,
The last.
and so, it's after several waves, you just sort of reimagine yourself and you're looking in New York. If you're working in fashion, you have to have a job. So it's,
Right.
you kind of just maneuver. And I ended up, after the corporate merchandising side was kind of falling out for everyone in the city, I ended up at like one of the best trend forecasting agencies in the world doing like
Oh wow.
admin work. But
Oh wow.
creatively, what was happening around me was very impactful in the way that I was going to approach the next steps. So
Yeah.
from there, I kind of got dipped back into vintage, and I was working at like another sort of archivist studio, and I was
Okay.
doing all the client face to face. So I started going out and working with fashion clients. That was my role.
Ah.
So basically, I made a lot of contacts, and I knew everyone who was buying
Oh.
vintage and fashion. So it kind of seemed very
Wow.
natural to sort of take it on my own and make a different iteration of what already worked, but there were parts that needed tweaks.
Right.
So I kind of knew, it was a lot of freelance jobs, a lot of like you're there for
Hmm.
a year, suddenly everyone's being sent home, and that's kind of the end. So
Oh wow.
that was where I started.
These are the
There
main
was
streets of
no,
New York,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You got to make
And
it there, right?
no consistency. Like you have a
Yeah.
job, you're doing great, you're getting great performance reviews, and suddenly like the budgets got cut. And so there
Wow.
were a lot of visual merchandisers that had a hard way to go during that time. So,
Right.
but
And this is like obviously pre 2010 when you started.
yes, yeah, it
So this is
was
like yeah, 2007 or
2006 is
okay.
when I started in New York. So,
Okay.
yeah. So I did
Okay.
internships, and then I did windows at Saks, and then I
Wow.
kind of got back in. That was a very production oriented job, which I loved, and it
Uh-huh.
was very creative and just sort of, but at the end of the day, you're executing someone else's vision. So
Right.
that's the theme that kind of like rang true for me. The more companies I worked at, the more I realized like executing someone else's vision is probably never going to really work for me.
Right.
So
Yeah,
you just
the
kind of,
seeds of entrepreneurship were being
yeah.
planted, obviously.
I mean, my whole family's entrepreneurs or educators or whatever. So there's
Yeah.
like two segments that I've sort of grown up around, and one's very disciplined and one's equally as disciplined and probably 10 times harder work. But
Uh-huh.
I found being able to like control my destiny was a lot more important
Yeah.
than stability, if that
Right.
makes sense, like in the
Oh, it
early
totally makes
years.
sense. It absolutely
Because
does.
it
I
yeah,
think everyone has to weigh that for themselves. Like is like you said, is stability or consistency in terms of
right.
income
If you're
or even
yeah,
just day to day.
Yeah. I
Or,
mean, if you're a
are you more
person
project
that,
driven or
yeah, if you're a
go ahead.
person that has to like have that rigidity in a corporate environment or a very structured environment, then
Hmm.
more power to you. It's
Right,
it's really a personal thing. So
right.
you're either
And
one
there's
of
a lot of
one of
jobs in that sense. Like there's
yes, of
a lot of
course.
work, an opportunity for that.
And there's
Um,
always, a high level of earning potential, and it's
right,
just a lot. There's a more direct path, I think,
right.
is
That's
the
interesting.
best way to say. Like there's a path that you take and you build up that way. And for me, it wasn't the mold for me.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean it's that rings true. Surely for myself. And I think like there's ways that that building my own business and stepping into entrepreneurship was like really uncomfortable because I
Yeah,
think maybe the community that I was raised in or the ideas that I had about society and what was expected of me was to fit in, like you said, kind of cog in the wheel. Um,
right.
uh, and it took a lot, it has taken a lot, and it's still taking a lot to learn the skills that are necessary to be like self-motivated and to be able to, um, like even now, right? Like to create content. This very
Yeah,
conversation is proof positive that it's like it's taken me years to get to the point where I, you know, um, can
100%
wear
same.
all the hats that are
Yeah,
necessary. Um, and I think, especially if you come from a environment that feels like, identity is built in what you do for a living, and it's normally just one word, right? Like you have,
yeah,
I'm a doctor or a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm a nurse. It's easy to explain.
right.
It's people have a frame of reference for what it is. Um, and if you shift and you have to create work for yourself out of something that you love, and while you're still discovering what it is that you love, it can be really, really challenging and really isolating. And
Yeah,
I think now there's a little more acceptance for like, especially like having lived in LA for as long as I did, and just seeing how many people started to almost refer to themselves as like multi-hyphenates,
yeah,
and that there's a little more understanding. I think it's a generational thing as well with, and then like, economy wise, like gig economy is changing everything because it's not like you're going to meet someone and be like, well, I'm a part-time actor and I drive for Uber and I work at Trader Joe's and
right.
um,
Yeah,
so it's interesting, but I have such like compassion for the people that have tried to carve out a space that didn't formally exist.
yeah,
And so it's like I really don't even want to describe what you do. I want you to lay it out because when you are capable of doing so much and you've like established yourself in so many different lanes, I feel like you deserve, you know, to lay it all out and not be like limited to like, well, he's into vintage, like um so I'm again just like really glad to be sharing this with you. But I do have a question because you mentioned something about um initially working, I think it was at the archivist studio, and you were dealing with fashion clients.
yep.
And can you elucidate for me, is that like individual men and women that are coming in to buy garments for themselves to wear? Or is
That was
that
mostly
brands or yeah.
it was mostly brands. So
Okay.
it wasn't a very private client like you're buying this to wear it. It was you're buying it for design, which is a lot of
Okay.
what I'm doing currently as well with other
Right.
aspects tossed in.
Okay. So that's
And it
like
was also
unbelievably exciting to me because I don't think people, and I think we talked on, touched on this a little bit when we first chatted, but it's like I don't think people have an understanding how much is being pulled from literal previous designs,
of
like
course, yes.
concrete actual designs that, you know, it's almost I think that the layperson or the average consumer is thinking, "Oh, you know what? That looks so much like this thing my mother had in the 60s," or but they maybe don't realize, no, it's literally that someone
Yeah,
went and someone sourced that piece, you know, that dress or that print or that combination of colors or that scale of whatever, and or the fit of something, right? Like some things are
yeah,
more obvious, but that there's just actual copies being made, and that's a big part of trend forecasting and design and creation, and right. So Would you
Yeah.
share more about that? Because I actually don't even know as much about that as I want to know.
Yeah. So with what I do, there's about three different core aspects of the business on the design side only. Retail is a whole separate venture from what I'm doing in the studio. But with
Okay.
the studio, basically, I'm going to explain it in the way that I explain it to my family and
Okay.
to people who really know nothing about the industry,
Perfect.
because I think it's kind of good to put it in context. So,
Yes,
a
please.
brand a brand will contact me and they'll basically say, these are our mood boards for summer 2022, which is the season we're
Okay.
currently working on. So
Right.
we're a year out ahead of what's already in the store. And they're
Right.
asking
And
me
that's another
for,
aspect I think that people
yeah,
don't get. The how much in advance are these things being worked on?
yeah. I mean,
Right.
and that has changed specifically, like the lead times for things has changed a lot. So it used to be when I first started in the business over a decade ago, you had a year and a half basically to put together a collection. Now you have more fast fashion driven companies and,
Right.
bigger businesses. They're pushing it to a 6 month timeline. So they're waiting until they already see what you wear, what you like, and
Right.
that's how it's going to roll out the pipeline. Like their lead times are shortening so that they can be
Right.
reactive to what they see on blogs and Instagram and TikTok and every
Right.
visual platform that there is.
So for
So,
example, like for people to have a frame of reference, because there's like different it feels like times of influence. Like there's, you know, uh maybe a high fashion brand is designing, like you said, a year and a half out, or was, right? But now,
yep,
right now, you guys are working on summer 2022.
yep,
Is that right? Um,
yep,
but there's also the fast fashion element and those brands that are seeing what's being released at, for example, like Paris Fashion Week
right.
right
And
now,
they're on
right? And
fall
they're
now.
looking to just rip that shit off. We can
Well,
curse on
they're
this
on
campus
they're on
if we want.
fall they're on fall 21. So they're like
Okay,
6 months
right,
from now. It's,
right,
the end of summer this will come into the store. So it's
right,
there's definitely a different um there's different timelines and just capacities from the manufacturing side that they can accommodate that other brands can't. They need good
right,
lead time in order to keep it at a cost that you can afford to buy it.
right. And I'm so curious
Um,
because like something like I heard, I think it was like like something like Fashion Nova is able to design and produce, like have on their site within a day and a half,
I believe it. I mean,
which is
it's pretty. I've heard over the years, I've heard that certain companies have, people manufacturing on boats. I mean, there's just all these
holy shit.
things. So who knows, like what
Wow.
really can be done and in what time frame?
Right,
But I
right,
know in a 15-year period, I've seen it go from very far out to very close. So
right,
it's the supply chain has changed a lot. But to
right.
not diverge from what I actually do.
Yeah,
So
please.
when a company is like, "Hey, I've got spring concepts for 2022,"
Okay,
they'll either share with me a few descriptors about what they need for a print, which would be the
okay,
textile itself. So they would come to
right,
me for the artwork. So
okay.
most of that would come from a vintage fabric or something that we've designed with our freelance designers that we print onto fabric.
Wow.
So they'll come to me with concepts and tick words and some imagery if you're lucky, maybe not. Sometimes you just have to go off what the brand will like. So
Wow.
so
Keeping
from
in their
there,
aesthetic and trying
yeah,
to anticipate what they are trying to describe or
exactly. It's
so for example, like
mostly
you posted a reel today on your Instagram. Go follow, by the way. Happy to say, if you're not following D Smith on Instagram, please go follow him on Instagram. And of course follow me too. But you
follow
posted
both
a
of
reel
us.
today. Yeah, follow everything. Follow on every platform. Find YouTube, TikTok. We're
I'll put
taking
my
over.
link tree up later.
Yes, please. Um, no, there's no shame in that game. That's what stereo is for. It's like follow, follow, follow. Smash that follow, I think is what we say over here.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so you posted a reel today and you shared swatches, like large scale swatches of
Yep.
different leopard prints, animal prints. And so those are all, or most of them are vintage prints. Like, can you explain that to me?
Those
Give context to that image that people may have seen today.
Yep, those are all vintage prints. And basically, that was from a meeting that I just had with a very big company the day before. So I pulled out
Cool.
one of the categories that I showed, and animals back. You'll be happy to know, Ellie.
Oh, it
Um,
never went anywhere, but yes.
build it up,
Oh, I'm
girl,
very
cause
excited.
it's
Oh,
coming.
good.
It's
Oh,
coming again.
great. Oh, great.
So yeah, I mean, we've been doing a lot of leopard and zebra prints, as we like to
Uh-huh.
say. So
I do
that's,
like you saying
you know,
zebra. That's nice.
zebra is my favorite. All my British
Oh,
clients say zebra, which I love.
right. Yeah, that's
Um,
perfect.
so yeah, and basically there's three parts of the business. So there's the
Yeah.
vintage prints, like what you
Okay.
saw in the clip, and
Okay.
then there's original prints, which I have five different designers, most in Europe, a couple in LA, that design a range every season of like new prints that are specifically for trends that we can't cover in vintage. So
Okay.
anything that I can do in vintage, I'm going to do in vintage because that's
Yeah.
what people come to me for. But the categories that emerge that we can't cover in vintage, we design it and sell them the copyright, and it's 100% their
Oh,
design.
wow. Oh, wow.
And
So
then,
when you say this is just to clarify, because I'm learning so much. When you say vintage prints, it's not that you're going to be selling the rolls of actual fabric.
no, 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 no.
You're
We're
selling
selling
the
them
print
the
itself.
inspiration.
Ah,
Yeah.
and you're
So
going through, right.
yeah. And from that, it has to be made into a digital file to be printed on their fabric in their facilities. So I'm generating the creative, like, credentials for them to send on to the factory
Okay.
on the print
Okay.
side. And
Great.
then
And then you
the
have your
third
original
side,
prints. Yeah. And the
yep.
third is, go ahead.
And with the original prints, they get the digital artwork that they can easily, like, it's exclusive to them, so they can run it wherever, whenever. With the vintage, it's supposed to be changed 40%. Sometimes it is, sometimes
Ah,
it isn't. But who's all
who's
depends who's
hunting?
watching. Yeah. And
Wow. That's so interesting. So it has to be changed 40%. So that's
yeah,
like maybe the scale's a
that's the
little
legal
different.
rule
Like
of
what?
thumb. The
Right, of
scale,
course.
most of the time, if you're taking a print from
Uh-huh.
1960, it probably has, it's was silk screened on silk. There might be 20 colors. When it's
Wow.
put through modern production, usually 16 is the max for silk screens. So
So
it's
it's getting
like
flattened.
it gets flattened, it changes, it's on, synthetic fabric. It will never look quite the same.
Oh, that's
Or
so
even,
interesting. I
yeah,
hadn't considered because of course I think that's something that's unconscious for someone like that's freaking amazing, Matt.
yeah, it
That's something that's
changes.
like unconscious to me because I'm able to like just when I go to Goodwill now, right? I'm able to discern like what's vintage on a rack pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Um, and most of that I think is because you get acclimated to seeing the quality of print
yeah,
and the quality of fabric, and so it's as if it stands out or is highlighted in your mind. Or that's how I think of it. Is like I can look at a whole rack kind of at a glance and be able to figure out which ones. The struggle I find is that occasionally I find something that I feel like from afar is certainly vintage, and I pick it up. It's almost always Zara,
yeah.
and then I feel like I got punked. Um, but I can see
They,
now what you're saying about kind of the depth or the richness because of how it was produced at that time. That is probably one of those markers that I haven't known how to put into words
yeah,
that differentiates it. That's
yeah.
really cool.
It in modern fashion, I find most of it gets dumbed down to the point
Right.
that it would never probably be fully recognizable as what it starts as. So, and
Oh,
that's coming from years of me seeing it, like, go into
yeah.
store after I sold it to someone a
Wow.
year before, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that really looks very different than it did
Oh,
on
wow.
silk. you know.
Wow, that's super interesting.
And also,
How does that feel? Is it like
I
a
love
little
that
sad?
part of it. I mean, I
Okay.
miss that part of it because I've been at
Okay.
home in Hudson Valley,
Yeah.
New York for a year, so I'm not really
Right.
fully out seeing it anymore as I
Oh,
used to be.
right. Okay.
So it's very different. You know, I
Yeah.
kind of I do my thing. I do my research still. I'm still meeting with a lot of clients. It's all Zoom and, you
Sure.
know, always fun new platforms. It's much easier. I don't have to lug a suitcase. So that
Oh,
works.
were you previously like taking
Uh,
samples with you
oh,
and
yeah.
taking textiles and oh wow.
Yep.
So yeah,
It
there's
had
that's
to
what I always tell people
80.
is like the idea of being a stylist or being in fashion is beautiful and glamorous, but like the reality is there's a ton of schlepping. It's
Yeah.
so much
It's
schlepping.
this job. The textile studio is by far the most slippy job I've ever had, and
Oh wow.
it's lots of fun, and you get to go places you would never dream that you would go, like repeatedly. So
Wow.
it was a lot of fun, but I don't know if I'm going to take it back on the road anymore.
Yeah.
And also,
Well,
it
you're
damages lots of
oh.
garments. So
Oh,
I'm
that's
kind of of the
right.
mindset as someone who's actually archiving now, I
Right.
don't really want to damage the garments the same way they used to get like tossed about. So
Right. Okay, so so is that would that be the third part of what you're doing now?
third part is like taking the vintage garment for the silhouette and design detailing. And it can
Okay.
be it can be the cut of a dress, it can be a detail, a fabric manipulation, a smock, a pleat, a balloon sleeve. It could be a lot of different elements. And that part of the business is particularly important because most factories can't produce something without a hard good to go from. So for you to sample something from scratch, build it,
Right.
design it, and actually pattern it out and do all
Right.
that, the amount of time and money that goes into that. If
Yeah,
you
the
can
pattern
get
making
any,
part, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can get any hard sample like what I
Ah.
sell,
Oh,
then
that's
it
so interesting.
really cuts the time down a lot and the cost down a lot. And that's why a lot of companies come to me because they know I'm going to give them something that's about 85% ready to go to the factory.
That
So,
is crazy, and I had never considered that.
yeah. And
Wow.
that's a huge
Yeah.
part of the business. That's as big as the print. So, I mean, and I built that part of the
Wow.
clienteling side of it has taken over a decade to get the contacts and just being able to actually do that as a
Yeah.
service. It
Yeah.
took a lot of time and building and crazy amounts of money to get killer vintage. So it was, you know,
Wow.
it was a lot of fun and it's still a lot of fun, but it
Yeah.
was brutal to build that side of the business because that's a
Right. Okay.
specific business. It's a different set of contacts. It's everything.
And so that's the archival part. That's the archiving.
Yeah, I would say more of that falls into the archiving part because it's a
Okay.
lot more just pure design reference related.
Okay.
So
And how is that all? Yeah, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
do
I just
everything
asked
from
you a
like,
question.
sorry,
No, no.
I do everything from like 1700s up to like
Oh,
2010. So
wow.
I've got a vast collection of just amazing examples from each decade and period that I work in.
Wow. I'm blown away right now. I think I had, obviously I don't know the industry from this part, right? From this angle. And I think even
It's a,
having friends that are just like that have their own clothing lines and are designers, um, and considering doing collabs at some point, the question was always around, okay, but you're going to need to get a pattern maker. You're going to need to, inspiration off of Pinterest is nice, sketching is nice, but that's not the same thing as a pattern.
it's not.
Um, and so to realize like I hadn't extrapolated out how designers were using the vintage that I knew that they were sourcing, because I think I had only considered it in more abstract, like they're vaguely taking the silhouette or they're vaguely approximating a print, right? I
Right.
didn't realize that they're actually studying the specific dimensions
Yeah.
and like the actual folds of the pleats. And that's just very interesting. And to think of it like not just as an homage, but because it's financially beneficial, which of course I should have realized, because that's what businesses do, is they try to find
Yeah.
ways to be economical. But wow. Okay, so my next question is, you have all of these clothes that are strictly for the purposes of your archive. Is that right?
Yeah,
And then
nothing's
you have your studio?
exclusively for that.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was like, because everything's got a price, right?
Yes, it
Everyone's
does.
got a number. Yeah, that's the funniest thing about vintage, is because there's this kind of a something between like je ne sais quoi and like an umami. There's
Yeah,
something special about a piece, and because they're so rare, and of course, like based on your collection, there are pieces that are probably completely priceless,
yeah,
um, but yeah, there is always an element of like, well, if you quote me, if you if you
yeah.
meet my
I mean,
ask, yeah,
I have to say, like, I've had people walk in that I never dreamed that I would even like consider letting something go, but
yeah,
you never know.
right. You
If
find me
it's
on the right
there, it
day.
might be for sale.
That's
So,
interesting.
um,
So
I
so
try to
to give,
do.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just so excited. You can tell my energy is like,
Oh my God, I'm
um,
so like not super very stereofied yet. So
yeah, no, it's fine.
it's taking me a minute. I'm sorry,
No,
guys,
you're
for
doing
everyone who's
amazing. No,
listening.
you're doing amazing. This is exactly what I hoped for. Yeah, I feel like you're really opening my eyes, and I feel like, for anyone that's a, I feel like to be honest, my core group of people that buy from me, some are vintage connoisseurs, and some are people that are more like what you'd call an everyday consumer, or someone that's more used to modern. And so I'm
Right.
trying to kind of bridge that for them and say like, hey, let's make this a little more accessible, and you can see how we can style this piece. And yes, you could go buy it at Zara, but you could actually buy mine that's one of a kind, and you could spend less,
Exactly.
and you can, keep garments out of the landfill, and you can keep, consumption, head in the right way. So there's all those angles, but not everyone that follows me has any reference for vintage. And so my job, I see it, is to try to sell them on the concept, um, so that hopefully like vintage sellers like yourself and people that are, passionate about it, will have more consumers heading their way. But this is all backstory that I feel like really informs how we make our purchases, because it informs like how the products are made in the first place. So this is all utterly
Right.
fascinating to me. And I am beyond enthusiastic, generally speaking, but specifically with this. So I'm just trying to get this all straight. Like I think how many square feet of vintage do you have?
Um, the studio's 5,000. I've got another couple 1,200 off site too, just because you need
Just
another 1,200 square feet of extra storage space. So
we all do. Everyone does. Yeah.
yeah,
It's just good
and
business. Yeah.
I'm and completely still actively buying, so it's
Ah,
ridiculous.
okay.
So
So,
it
but so
I don't
so
know.
the for someone that wants to come to and potentially make an appointment with you, because you're appointment only right now, um,
Yep,
and obviously you can connect with Matt through Instagram if that's something you're interested in. I hope you are. Um,
absolutely.
yes, but so your studio, when someone encounters that, is it all? Is there like a back room, with some of the more antique pieces? Like, what is the experience of being in your space?
It's a sprawling, full open space. Everything's categorized by either technique, decade, if it's beaded, and that's even subcategorized by the era of beading it's from. I have a architectural map cabinet that's full of flapper dresses because I can't hang them. So
Oh, wow.
it's
Right.
yeah, it's
Oh my
very
God,
it's
that's a
very
whole other
compartmentalized.
can of
So
worms.
you
Yeah.
can you can definitely hit up what you're into,
Yeah.
and you can also find something that you didn't know you were into. So
Yes. That's awesome. And so those pieces are for sale. That's not just you're not just a museum. When I hear the word archive, it's
no,
like I
no,
don't always
not at
understand.
all.
Okay.
Not at all. And we have a retail side of it. We sell on Etsy. We sell in person at the Newburgh Vintage Emporium in the Hudson Valley.
Great.
We
Shout out to
do.
them.
Yeah, exactly.
Go follow them.
So,
Yep.
yep. So we're selling in a lot of different capacities, and there's a lot of different like price levels you can get into. There's things you can have for $20. There's things you can have for 20,000. It's really whatever you're after. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it's a lot of fun, and I honestly I love to see a piece go to someone who will love it to wear it.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than that to me because
Yeah.
I've seen many things that go to wherever they go once they leave my studio, and
Yeah.
clients, their office, or you know the factories, whatever. I just appreciate it so much more when it's someone who's going to love it and get to wear it than when it's just going to Hong
More of
Kong or
yeah.
India or wherever the factory is that it's being manufactured in. Like, there's just
Oh.
something about that it is what it
It's
is.
less personal.
But
Right.
yes,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think
hopefully they
that's
make it back to somewhere, but I'm not
right.
so sold.
Oh God. It's
I
sending sending your
know.
baby off on a boat,
Let me
right?
bring it
Goodbye.
down. I'm like, she
Wow.
went off
No,
across the
that's
sea and
I
now
start
she's
crying. We
not
have to play
coming
common.
home.
Yeah. That's fine. We'll figure it out. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I started selling in 2013, and it was really I was living in Los Angeles, and I just moved with my husband,
Where
and
did you live in Los Angeles?
we lived in Los Feliz, right next to
Oh,
Silver
so
Lake.
cute.
It
Love
was
it.
it was a good
It's
season.
one of my
Um,
faves.
yes, it's the Williamsburg of Los
Exactly.
Angeles. Yes,
I love a little
I felt
Silver
right at
Lake
home when
too.
I went to, yeah, exactly. Um,
Shout out to Silver Lake.
What was funny was living in Los Feliz and then driving down Sunset into Silver Lake and then Echo Park. It always felt like
Ah,
you're
so
entered
good.
Silver Lake when there's like more leather and everyone
Yeah.
looks a little bit more like unkempt. And it's like
Did
just
you?
kind of there was an obvious like you're wearing boots in the summer, but it's 100 degrees and everyone's just sweating, but we don't care because it's
Yeah.
fashion. Right.
Because it's
It's
ironic, darling.
little rock and roll. Exactly.
Did you go
But
thrifting
yeah.
at the American Vintage store over there? I love that
Oh
one.
my God, I love that
So
place. I
good.
can't believe you know it.
Miss it. I loved them all.
That was
I've trolled them for
amazing.
years.
Trolls them.
So
Yes, that's the
good.
perfect way of saying it. There was a place, this is just going to get hyper specific, guys, so hang tight. But like there was a spot on Hollywood Boulevard in like I think a few blocks from Grauman's Chinese Theater. So it was like Hollywood and Vine. And I want to say it was another
Yeah, they have
American
three.
vintage. And
There's
they
one in the
closed
north
that
too.
location. Yeah, there was one in North
Oh,
Hollywood. They
bummer.
closed the one on Hollywood, and I'm telling you, that was my favorite spot for Levi's when no one knew what was good.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and it was only buyers that would go. So it was like they had the best vintage Levi's, and I got them for $13. I
Oh,
mean,
so good.
and then I ended up selling some. So I got into vintage heavy in my late teens, early 20s, and then would had moved to LA, was going to school, and would go to like the Melrose Flea Market, Fairfax Melrose Flea Market. Ended up at Rose Bowl, but I started buying vintage, and then I would I know I don't want to hurt your feelings. I feel like I have to ask you how this sounds too. But I would take these dresses from like the 60s that maybe were a few sizes too large for me and had, an excellent print or had like a good overall structure. And I would take them to a tailor that I worked with, and I would kind of redesign them, like maybe hand the sleeves or take this off or put this on or whatever. Um, Now knowing the value of an archive, I'm feeling a little guilty, but I amassed a collection of like kind of modernized vintage,
Yeah.
and it really exceeded my needs in many ways. I think at that time I was like working as a bartender, going to school, and really never got a chance to wear these beautiful pieces.
Yeah.
And so, and the funny thing too is like if you're just working to pay off your vintage habit, you know what I mean? Like it was kind of a cycle, I think.
Yeah.
And then you have to have confidence, and that was something that was like a struggle for me, which is I think why I got into vintage in the first place, was that it made me feel unique and one of a kind. It made me feel like, as a young woman in her early 20s, I was like, I don't want to be objectified. I want to be seen as creative and intelligent. And so vintage was definitely a way that I felt like I was expressing that, especially with trying
And
to like redesign that stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
can I just say something about the
Yeah.
redesigning? Like,
Yes, please.
everyone, if it makes you love a piece, like, you have to love it, because you're not going to keep it in your closet. It's not going to
Right.
be around for more than a year if you don't love it. So
Right.
if you need a tailor to fix it to make it perfect for you,
Right.
I'm 100% on board with
Okay,
that,
cool.
because
Okay,
it
good.
brings a new life.
Yes.
Like,
And that's,
you
yes,
have to bring a
exactly.
new life to these things.
Right.
I've noticed just from doing social media a little heavier lately, I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, you pair this with this and it looks completely different than it did just hanging on the rack before. You
Exactly.
know what I mean? It's like you
Exactly.
have to bring it to life, and you have to love it, and
Right.
you have to want to keep it forever. And
Right.
sometimes you can go overboard, as you might have, but I'm sure
Never.
there
My
was
taste is
another girl.
exceptional.
Yes, and I'm sure there was another girl that was like, "Please let me have this. I'm dying for it. It's like my
Right.
dream thing."
Right.
So
Right.
I think
Yeah,
it's
so that was
all
that was
like,
definitely okay. Well,
yeah,
that's you've assuaged my guilt. I appreciate that because I have never actually I've
no
spoken to some
guilt.
vintage sellers, and like you're saying, like my perspective was always what can make this wearable, what can make
Right.
this attractive and seem like and this is pre kind of conversation around sustainability, but to me the idea of like being seen as an individual and not making a choice that was like the herd and not
Yeah,
making as a woman not making a choice that was just about showing off like TNA was like
exactly.
really important to me. And I think I always had high fashion taste, but I never had high fashion budget. So it was really like,
Yeah,
why does Alexander McQueen get to have all the fun, right? Like I should
exactly.
I should be able to access that Miu Miu dress in a way that I can interpret it. Um,
And you
and
can,
and so it was
because it came
100%
from,
for the love of it. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah, it totally was.
And
But
that Miu Miu dress came from a vintage piece anyway. So it's
right, right.
literally like you've
That's
just
hilarious.
found the same thing that Miu Miu made it from. So
Right, right. And that's
it's
what it always
not that
felt
hard
like.
to reimagine it. Like,
Yeah,
it might be just getting it tailored for your body specifically, and that's
right.
$20 or 30 goes a long way at the dry cleaner slash tailor. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can get a lot done.
yeah. I mean, I think my tailor had a joke. I'd walk in and I would be like, okay, and he'd be like, less than 100. Like he'd give me this. He was a fabulous older Turkish gentleman, and I would be like, okay, I want to take this off, and I want to do this, and I want to add this, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to move the buttons. And he would just look at me, and I'd be like, okay, so what? Quote me, right? And he'd be like, less
Yeah.
than 100 if you're lucky. Like, so I don't know. I mean, it's still if you're buying a dress. Maybe from the 60s, as I did frequently, that was kind of my more of my style. You're buying a dress for $20, $30 at the flea market that is reminiscent of a dress that's obviously a couple hundred to a couple thousand, and you're
Yeah,
putting in $60 of alterations, you're still getting a look that's more interesting, more personal, adds an added level of confidence um, because you've invested in it. And I think that's an
absolutely.
element that I try to, have shared with my clients over the years is there is something that changes when you've invested in a garment, not just, price tag one time, oh, it was on sale at Anthropology, but like when you've gone to bat for this thing, when you've decided that you really want this fitted to your form and in your, that it bonds you to it and you're more likely to wear it, and you're more likely to feel good when you wear it, and you're probably more likely to get compliments because it's not like anything that anyone has ever seen. Um,
And
so yeah,
it
so
also
I'm glad.
makes you feel good.
Exactly,
You
exactly.
feel good in it. I have
Right.
my favorite thing I ever got was on Everything But the House, and it was just an auction that they were shipping clothing, and they had like Gucci O Gucci 70s khaki trousers, and they were
Wow.
amazing. And I got them for $5, and I went to the
Oh,
tailor and spent 30, and I
right,
still got out for cheaper than a pair of H&M or ASOS
right,
or
right,
Zara, anything, and
right.
they're still in my closet, and I still wear them 10
Oh
years
my
later.
God.
So, and they
Oh my God, I
You
love it.
wouldn't have thought too much about them at first glance, but when I put them on, I was like, this needs like one little tweak and they're ready to go. So
That's
it's
so
worth it.
great. You
And
know
it's a
what's
piece that
interesting
you can
too?
have.
Right. And it's like anyone that compliments you that like is like, what is the deal with these pants? It's like vintage, and I think that this is the beginning of something very special. Our conversation, because I think vintage has an inherent, like an innate community that's built of people
Yep.
that appreciate a certain level of, I think it's a level of taste or like um, an experience, that there's something to the joy of someone, not just paying you a compliment that you feel flattered by it, but that you're instantly able to communicate. You'll never guess I got these there and I did this and it was only this much money. And, it's like, I loved vintage because it allowed me to have a personal interaction with someone. And I think I like to think that I like people. And so it was
Yeah.
like, if I just buy something, and this is not like, I'm not 100% secondhand and vintage, although I'm probably like
Same.
95. But
I'm moving closer
it's all a
though
mix.
as
I
I go
know, I
along.
know. The last year, really,
Yeah.
we're really getting close.
2020 put me right straight on vintage again. So
Yeah, I've let my freak flag just fly now. I feel like
yeah.
I'm not trying to like be a stylist for um well-to-do women in Los Angeles anymore. And nothing against them. I love my clients and I love my people,
Well, I
but
love your
it's
style. It's fun.
thanks. But it's fun to just go, you know what? And this is not, again, this is not about who I was working with, but this is about me, I think, feeling more comfortable with saying, this is what I geek out about. This is what I
Exactly.
enjoy. And I don't need to become more impressive, the idea of being a
Yeah.
stylist and what that needs to look like.
Well, you're
And so I feel really
reimagining.
delighted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're reimagining yourself as I
Right.
think most of us did in 2020. I feel like I'm in a
Right. Exactly.
completely different moment than I was in at the
Right.
beginning of 2020, at the end of 2020.
Absolutely.
Professionally, everything. It's just,
Yeah.
it went from, you travel. I used to travel every 2 weeks to a different country and
Wow.
or coast, and now I haven't been on a plane in over a year. So it's crazy.
Every
After
two
15
weeks.
years, yeah, more or
Wow.
less. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so I went from this one extreme kind of lifestyle that was very physically dominating and just, it was
Yeah.
all
Because that's
consuming.
exhausting.
Fashion,
Yeah.
yeah, fashion is like a hamster wheel. Once you're on it, you're on it. And when you get it, you're off it. So it's
You
been
get spit
weird for
off. Right.
me. Yeah, it's
Wow.
been weird for me to be kind of like running the treadmill and not
Yeah.
actually being off and or really on. Like it's very strange year in that
Oh,
sense
that's
for the
interesting.
business, for just
Yeah.
like how we operate. We would have never done a Zoom call a year ago. You know what I mean? And now that's
Right.
like the preferred method to do business. So
It is crazy how much, I mean, every industry is changing. I love to
it,
use pivot, but
yeah,
now it feels like it's wildly overused.
it
But
was just
but
such
it
a
is. It's like everyone's
tactile.
had to make changes. Yeah. And I think, what's funny is that I actually pretty much stopped working with clients at this point last year because I couldn't work with them in person. And I tried for, with a few exceptions, um, to do virtual work. And I had done remote work with women in New York and kept some clients in Los Angeles. So it wasn't that I wasn't familiar with or
Right.
comfortable with the virtual element. But it's like I just so preferred the in person and like you said, the tactile, being able to like, for me and
Absolutely.
my work, it was like going through refining women's wardrobes, mostly women, and it was like looking at every single item and essentially asking someone to defend its existence in their wardrobe. Like,
Right.
tell me about this piece. How did you acquire it? Why do you love it? Why haven't you worn it? What are all of the, who, what,
Why are you
where.
keeping it?
Exactly. And most of the time, at least if it's something that they end up getting, parting with or something, there's the conversation of what do we love about it? Is it the print?
Yeah.
Is it the color combination? And it's like based on the consultation that I've done with them about their personal design, it's really, is this referencing everything that you communicated about your visual values, about the things that you
Yeah.
love, about who you are and who you say you are? Is the first thing that you say about this, well, it's sloppy, And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I
It,
don't
it
think you
doesn't look
describe yourself as
good.
sloppy in any capacity. Yeah. So it's really just trying to help people connect and have integrity in that sense, practice their integrity and saying, I'm going to reflect who I am visually.
Yeah.
And it's going to do me good. It's going to feel good, and it's going to get it dressed easier. But
Yeah.
like I'm saying, like part of that job was mostly standing in front of someone, standing with them in the mirror and saying, okay, well, what if it didn't have sleeves? What would that be like? Like it was employing all of those skills I used that I had learned vintage
Yeah.
and with getting obsessed with redesigning and saying,
Yep.
okay, you're not wearing this as a dress, but maybe it's not meant to be a dress. If it was a blouse, if it was a top and a skirt, what would you? And then their minds would be like, what? I would totally wear it if it was just a skirt. It's too much as a dress. I won't wear it as,
Yeah.
so and so that process is so interactive. It's very intimate work, right? You're standing with someone in their
Yeah.
underpants. It's very intimate work.
Absolutely.
They're giving over a certain element of control in
Yeah.
asking for your opinion and wanting you to weigh in. So for me, it was like that's such special work, and it's something that's very hard to replicate through virtual services. And so it was like, how do I chop up who I am or what I'm doing in this way, and like sell off pieces of it? And I just really struggled to make that transition, and I think I just didn't have energy for that. And I think it was
Yeah.
at the same time that I had already started doing these, what started as like haul videos on YouTube. I ended up doing what I now call like fashion show and sell through my Instagram stories. And it's like virtual fashion
Which
shows.
I
And
love.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I realized like I have energy for this. I'm,
Yeah.
upon moving back to Miami, I have found the thrift scene to be exceptional. And the vintage that I find while thrifting, because those are different things that I think people don't always understand, is wonderful. It's abundant here.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go in that direction. And, obviously now a year later, we're podcasting and,
I know.
connecting the vintage universe. But yeah, I mean, it's such a great way to connect. I think vintage is different than what you'd call contemporary clothing in that people tend to be passionate about what they're wearing and what they're buying, and
Yeah.
they tend to
There's a thought
appreciate.
process behind it.
Yeah, yeah, and they appreciate that there's a
It's not
story
a
there.
just it was put on a rack for me. It's
Right,
I found this and there's a
right,
story to it
right,
and there's a
right,
reason why I love it. And
right.
I think that's what people really need to learn about buying a vintage garment is
Yeah,
it's such a special thing and you may see one just like it and you may never see another ever
ever.
again
Oh my God.
in all
Yeah,
your digging. And believe me, I've dug around a lot and I know what's been
yeah,
around 100 times and I know things
yeah.
that I've seen once and I've never
Right,
seen it again.
right. And when you find those pieces, you're like, this was, especially I think knowing when kind of overconsumption or overproduction really started. And that's the
Yeah.
difference, I think, between, like you're saying, where vintage begins and ends,
Yeah.
and like retro-ish stuff kind of
Mm-hmm.
starts. Is like in the 80s, things just started to get produced
Yeah.
rate, and the 90s was even worse. So it's like, there's just more of a certain kind of thing. And
Yeah.
finding a crazy silk dress from the 60s with an incredible, I'm looking at a dress right now, like with weird, like incredible, unique batiking and tiki print. Like it's like, I don't know what I'm looking at. This is the most extraordinary thing. Like,
Yeah.
um, and no, I'll never find another one. Um,
Yeah. It's a
and
quality
yeah,
thing. And
right,
that's where you'll never go wrong with vintage is the quality is going to be the highest it ever was at the time you bought it. Like
right.
that example was probably the best craftsmanship you'll ever get because it only gets
Right,
worse as we go
right.
along. So
And a lot of things were
unfortunately, I hate
handmade.
to say that. Yes, absolutely.
And that's the other
You'll
thing I
find
kind of
more
hate
50s
to
and
see.
60s things that were
Yep,
handmade with no
right.
label, no, they weren't from a department store, and someone could sew that well that it'd be a $5,000 dress now. for the same
Right.
thing that someone sewed in their house on their Singer sewing
Isn't that
machine.
crazy? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know like my grandmother sewed,
It's couture level now.
dresses for, yeah, actually, I don't know that she was couture level, but she was an artist. But yeah, like she sewed dresses for all of my mother was like one of 10. So it's like she sewed dresses for all of the girls and made all the
Yeah.
bloomers for the boys, and it was like a regular thing. That they'd have their Sunday clothes and it would be like this beautiful little smocking um and that's a lot. I'm like, that's a lot of dresses, lady. Like
It is.
that's
It's a
quite a
lot
lot
of
of work. I
work.
mean, it's a lot of
It's
kids, but like,
craftsmanship.
yeah, there was just a pride, I think, that they took in how they
Yep.
appeared and knew that like that the best that they could do was to learn those skills themselves, um, and hone those skills. And I think that's also something that I really feel like, you know, I feel passionate about. It's actually not something I'm really skilled in terms of I sew by hand, but
Same.
I'm not right. And it's like that's something I feel like is something I
It's a
want to take
skill I
on.
wish I had.
Yeah. Right,
And I
right.
probably will take that skill on at a certain point
Right.
because I get a little fed up with all the little inconsistencies that I'm like, I can
Right.
fix it. I know I
Right.
can fix that.
I think that's the other element of like when you're someone who has incredible attention to detail, which is it sounds like you do, and being that I see your taste level, I know that you do. It's like that's part of the
You
challenge of
notice.
outsourcing alterations. And that was part
Yeah.
of why I had a real love-hate relationship with my tailor, was that he knew that I would just be standing there making sure that it was like really executed perfectly, because it's like
Well, you were doing couture fittings in LA. So, I mean,
right, that's basically
it
what it
has
was.
to happen. Hell's
Yeah.
Kitchen was never the same the first time I walked into my tailor. I was like, oh no, I've got a bag of shit that's got to
Yeah.
be done right away.
That's
Like,
incredible.
there's no time to spare. We have to do this right away. I just
That
moved
is
in around the
incredible.
corner, but you're going to know me
Hell's
by name.
Kitchen. Hell's Kitchen. Oh my God, you're my people. That's so good. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, I think one of the elements that I hope to share that, is part of obviously like this conversation, and the ones that I want to have is like um that these are skills that need to be passed down, and that they still have a place in our modern culture.
They
And
do.
like at some point we lost touch with our dressmaker, right? If,
Yep.
and we lost those skills, and we lost, and I think also like this is probably another conversation entirely, but um, you know, I think that there's elements of feminism that impacted how my mother raised me, and trying to reduce the amount of things that were maybe classically female roles in the house, or chores or things like
Yep.
that. So I think there was a diminished emphasis on learning those kind of skills, like cooking and cooking and cleaning
Yeah.
and sewing and things like that. I felt very deficient in those, and not
Same.
necessarily to be this warrior for like a terrible return to gender roles or something like that, but to say that I think everyone could be well-rounded. And
Men
I saw
and
some
women.
article. Exactly. And I think I saw an article, I want to say it was like Wall Street Journal yesterday. I'll find it and I can send it to you, or send it to anyone who's interested if you follow me on Instagram. But I know, I love doing that. It's so funny. But it was like that the resurgence of men taking on, there's a trend towards men learning how to sew and starting to
Yeah.
design their own labels. And so I was like really encouraged by that, because I think, these are, although my brand is the Ladysmith, and there's a core element of like wanting to learn what it is to be a woman, or be more fully who I am, right? And wanting to be refined, and wanting to take on more skills, and wanting to be mature, I think is like the cry of my heart,
Yeah.
is to be well developed and to like reach this potential that I was told I had, right? Um, and I think part of that is to like be capable, that like if my pants need hemming, why am I outsourcing that? If
Right.
there's a 2 inch here or there, whatever, if there's a button that falls off, I don't want to be dependent. And maybe that sounds crazy, but there are things that we can learn to do for ourselves, and I think there were a lot of things in my early 20s that I just felt like very dumb in, and
Yeah.
just was like, why can't I figure out how to make food? Like, why can't I do my laundry well? Like,
Yeah.
garment care in general. I think so. I got super excited and interested in vintage and trying to master garment care and trying to master like how to, you know,
How do
if
you
I'm going to
preserve
hand sew, then
this?
hand sew. Yeah, because I think
How do
that
you
there's like,
how do you
uh,
replicate what it was to begin
right.
with?
Yeah.
Because
It's like, how do you honor it? Right. Like,
yeah,
how do you like give it its due? And I think also like part of it is in some ways kind of assimilating and saying like, you know, for me, vintage, there's another element, not just like that I loved it because it was beautiful or that it was interesting or had a story or that it fit me when I was young and I didn't fit into things, you know. Um,
yeah,
there's all that, but then there's the element of like I was raised in a really wealthy environment and I didn't have as much money. Um, you know, my family wasn't of that position. So
yeah,
like it was a main concern was to assimilate and appear that everything was kind of equal, right? Like to fit in
yeah.
with the Joneses. And so it's like, how do you take $20 and make it look like 200?
Same
And I
here,
think,
girl.
yeah, yeah, right.
I'm
Anyone
with
who's
you.
shopping at Goodwill like knows what that
I
is.
know.
Yeah, and so it's like that's something that's a skill that's like kind of forged in the fire, you know. Um, and now I
But
feel
can I
like how
say,
beautiful, right, that you're using it in this way. And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but can I say, if you have that skill, if
Right.
you have that eye, if you have that like touch, it's
Hmm.
amazing what that can open up for you. I
Right.
mean, I'm from southeastern Kentucky. It's a place that no one dares like dom on the fashion industry from. And
Right.
I have this accent that we've been hearing the whole time. It
Yeah.
was, for
The
years
charming
before I moved to New
gentleman.
York,
Hmm.
everyone was like, oh, you have to lose this accent. You have to do all these things. Like, you don't really have to do anything you don't want to do. You just have to
Oh,
find a way to make it work for you.
right.
So you can take that across like buying vintage, you can take that across your life, you can take that
Right.
across everywhere. And
Yeah.
it rings true. Like, if it works for you, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And that's
Right.
especially true in vintage.
Yeah. I
Just
mean,
say it.
for sure. I think, and what's interesting too is like the vintage the sellers that I've met, you know, in my travels, so to speak, um, living in different places and kind of getting to know the owners of different stores. There's a certain kind of person that invests their life in this, and
Absolutely.
it's like it is like there's a bond there because we're all like of the same mind and
Batshit crazy.
right.
I mean, like,
Right,
you
like
have to
always
be.
got an angle. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
everyone's got their personal aesthetic, and I
Mm-hmm.
think like, you know, in different parts, like when I was living in Orange County and like taking time
Where were
from
you in
LA,
Orange County?
I was in Newport Beach.
Oh, bless your heart. How cute. My
Like,
favorite. Oh my God.
yeah,
Love it.
it's a sweet area.
Obsessed.
Are you? That's so funny.
Yes,
There's
I am. Did
there's an
you ever go
amazing
see?
vintage
I know
store.
it.
Do
I
you?
go. Yeah.
If you
She's a
say
rocket
Swelligant.
scientist too. Of course it's Swelligant. Hello, Swelligant.
Yay, Nikki! Nick is
Nicole,
so
right?
cool.
That's
Yeah,
her
Nick.
name. Yeah, I
Yep.
love her.
Yeah, she
She's
has
the
two stores
best.
now. She's
Does she?
amazing.
Oh
She
shit, I
has
gotta
one.
go.
Yes. So shout
Can't
out.
wait to go
This is how
back.
we do. We go shout out to Swelligant in Newport Beach, and her
Yep.
second store is Star Day Vintage in Los Angeles.
Oh,
Yeah,
good for
she's a freaking
her.
legend, dude. She's
Yeah.
amazing.
I've
Um,
been Me and her have
yeah.
had a nice working relationship for many
Oh,
years.
crazy. That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
That's so
Oh
cool.
my
See, look
God,
at this. This is
obsessed.
like this is the community that is vintage. Is that there's
We're going to
like
have a separate talk about our vintage people after this.
yes,
I'm going to
that's
call you immediately after this call, and we're going to
oh
do
my
a
gosh.
whole like vintage guide for LA and Orange
Oh
County.
yes,
Available for purchase
dude.
on Smith / Ladysmith.
It's a collab. I'll send you an affiliate link.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. No, I mean, truly, I think like a really good vintage guide um
Oh
is really
God, I've
needed.
been
And I
working on
think,
it for years.
yeah,
I've got
yeah,
it.
good, good,
I
good,
could
good,
do
good,
it.
good,
I'm
good.
about ready to write the book for real. I
Perfect,
just need to know
perfect.
who's made it through COVID, and then we'll sort it
Oh
out.
shit.
It'll go to
Right,
press.
right. Who's pivoted?
Yeah,
Um, right.
it's
No,
been a hard
that's
road.
that for sure. I mean, absolutely. That's I think that's like you said, like the joy of vintage is touching the textile, is seeing it.
Yeah.
Obviously getting to try things on. I think that's like almost the hilarious part I realized today because I went to Goodwill and I found some things. So follow me on Instagram. Because I'll be shooting.
Follow me on Instagram too, Matt Smith.
Yes, follow
and
Smith.
Newber Vintage Emporium.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's that. Might as well throw it out there.
Dude, get it. Yeah.
It's all in the Hudson Valley. Come and get it.
I can't wait to go, by the way. Yeah.
Might be down your way sooner than later, hopefully, when injections happen. So I do have in-laws near your way. So
I'm sorry, when you say injections happen, it sounds like you're coming to Miami for plastic surgery, which I'm totally great for.
Oh, no. I mean, like,
you mean the vaccine?
No, vaccine, yes.
I know.
I'm coming. I'm ready.
That's so great. Oh,
I know Florida's open, but I'm not quite ready yet.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You'll just have to take a train straight down, like
it's
a
fine.
van.
I'll stop in at Orlando and take the train down.
Yep. Oh my God, it's so good. But yeah, so I think I was talking about like, the experience. So like I was at Goodwill and I was like, this is crazy because a year ago, obviously before things changed, I was trying the things on in the store and making determinations as to what I wanted to keep. And it was mostly that I was buying for my own personal collection or starting to share, to sell those pieces through my stories. And I'm like, it's been almost a year now that I haven't been able to try on anything in store. And so I don't know that people have actually thought that through. Like when I'm doing these show and sell things and this stuff fits, it's mostly like pieces that I have not had a chance to put on. And I have to like estimate if this is going to fit me. And I try to be size inclusive. So often there's pieces that are much larger than my size or more petite. And I'm trying to go like, this is, I think, how it would look if you were 5'6" and you were 4 petite and you were. And so I'm trying to kind of combine, the knowledge I have about bodies and personalities and saying like, I think this is for this person. Are you like, raise your hand if you're 5'2" and an 8 petite? You know what I mean? Like, can I get a, so it's actually, it's pretty interesting. I can imagine it's been an absolute challenge to be a vintage seller, who's used to foot traffic, who's used to appointments and people coming through and buying. And I think with like the trauma of everything shifting and people going, what is the future of anything right now?
Well,
is anyone buying anyone, and the whole like,
we're on Etsy.
Are we not wearing clothes anymore?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
is it all pajamas?
We're doing some client meetings. We're definitely on Etsy now and stuff is moving along. So
that's good.
I mean, I think you just have to be open to things. Like I would have never been on this call for an hour like a year ago. I'm not very comfortable with this aspect to my life. Like I'm comfortable with it. I live in it. I just am not comfortable usually talking about myself. So it's very different now because you have to try different things that you may not be so comfortable with. And I think that it's a good thing to take on. And even with the Newber Vintage Emporiums, we've done live videos during closure. Like it's been a lot, it's like, wow, I'm in a whole different like moment than I would have been a year ago. Yeah. So it's very interesting. It's fun to see how it can evolve and what it can turn into though. So I'm actually more hopeful now than I was a year ago. So I feel like it's just a different day, a different thing, and we have to all sort of adjust how we do things, and hopefully we'll get to be back to at least half normalcy by end of the year, maybe. We'll see. Right. I don't know.
But I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you made, I think, at the start of the call, where like, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It's not for
the faint of heart.
It's a whole other can of worms. And at the same time, like there are so many skills that you develop on the fly that you have to, like you're saying, you have to evolve. You have to continue to expand your skill set. You have to become, I think everyone loves to say this, like you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, or at least you have to get familiar with it, because it's like you have to keep challenging yourself because your circumstances will tell you you need to change. Um, and in some ways, obviously, there's been a lot of loss, a lot of tragedy. There's a lot of businesses that have been lost,
Yeah.
in addition to human life. And so there's that, and that just deserves its own weight. But like, um, there are ways that I feel like that I've refined what I care to put my energy towards. Like you said, that it's made you reflect on the aspects of your business that you love and want to pursue, and then other things that maybe you want to stay away from, or do only a certain measure of.
Yep.
And I think that that does produce hope, because you're persevering. You're getting through obstacles, and you're at least, surviving. And then sometimes you're finding ways to like really thrive. And I think, I mean, even to be honest, even in the last like week or so, when I've really taken note of, your social media and how that's growing, and how, you're starting to do reels, and I'm so jealous.
Oh
It's so
yeah.
good. You're doing so good. I need to connect with your girl, because she's amazing.
She
But it's
is
like so
good.
cool to be like, look at this. You're just gonna keep like growing and blossoming, like you're gonna keep getting stronger. And you're social, like, look at, for you to say that a year
I
ago you
look
wouldn't
at
even
it.
have tried this, and now
Yeah.
you're a freaking podcaster. You're welcome. Like,
Well, I
that's
look
so
at
cool.
it. Thank you very
It's
much,
yours.
Ellie.
I bequeath
Um,
you. Yes,
I
you've been
I look at
knighted.
it as like it's an opportunity, and I have to at least
Right.
be open to the opportunity. It's not my
Yeah.
natural, like I've never wanted to be really on the front of the scenes. Like I've
Yeah.
always been happy to be on the backside. So
Yeah.
when I'm, confronted with a different way, but I'm also realizing like doing it a different way gives me such a different life that you couldn't have a year ago,
Yeah.
because you were like waiting for the next trip, and you had to
Right.
fly from this airport to this airport to this airport to get to,
Yeah.
so
Your focus
it's
was
like
on the
there's
existing.
so
Right.
much more time to actually devote to what I do, and like bringing it out to people, rather than it
Right.
just being like this closed off thing that I was like flying all
Mm.
over the world and leaving a horrible carbon footprint. So
Oh, that's interesting.
maybe
Right.
it's a maybe it's a better way to do it. It costs a
Right.
lot less to jump on a Zoom call than a flight. So
Oh, that's for sure.
that's
And
my,
in energy, which we
yeah.
realize
Oh
now
my
is a
God. No,
finite.
it's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And it's something that you have to consider. Like your time isn't free. It's
Right.
not,
Nor is your health,
no.
and not just because
And
of COVID, but just the pace
the
of
physical,
doing that
like,
constant, right? Yeah.
gruelingness. So,
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I love, obviously, I think I started talking about um, like sustainability, but not so much in the way that I think the fashion industry talks about it, but more in just realizing that, like, as someone who wanted, I called what I did like style wellness, or
yeah.
style coaching, but like the goal was really like, how can we improve your relationship with your self-image, with your sense of personal style, with your finances and how you shop and your consumption.
Yeah.
And working with compulsive
Absolutely.
shoppers was like absolutely something that was part of what I did. And that's, frankly, that's something I feel like I have recovered from, or maybe still now I feel like
Yeah.
I've fallen back into this goodwill, I
Well,
feel like,
you're
well, I
shopping
thought
for a
I,
different purpose
right.
now.
No, I know,
So
but
it's
it
more
is pretty
fun.
funny to be like, yeah, it's pretty funny to be like, oh, I thought I was like, tighten that up, and look, so the wheels are coming off again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so it was like, it was about your relationship with it. And I think that the word sustainable to me meant, is this something you can keep doing? Or are
Right.
your finances going to get out of hand? Or is your
Yeah.
closet going to burst the seams? Or are you going to just hate yourself so much? Or is this impairing your relationships? Or, is this
Yeah.
hurting you financially, where you're not going to be able to do what you want to do in the future because, you know, um, so for, or do, um, is it just unpleasant and you don't want to stay in that,
Yeah.
in feeling like you have nothing to wear, or you can't understand how to dress yourself, or you don't like your sense of style, or whatever. So like I was looking at sustainability from that standpoint, and saying like, from a human experience, from an individual's experience. And then I think it was about a year ago I started to realize, like, oh wait, this is the individual forms a family or a community, and then
Yeah.
it impacts the globe. And like you're saying, like, we all individually, all of our individual choices add up to a global impact. And so
Yeah.
seeing like, if I'm trying to advocate for being a more conscious consumer, and being a more discerning consumer. And even from the standpoint of like, let's be completely selfish and just think of us and say, don't you want to look better and waste less money? Don't you want to spend less
Exactly.
time trying stuff on and not walking out of the house? And don't you want, like if you just look at from that perspective, but then you open it up and you go, don't you want to have more money for trips with your family or like,
Yeah.
do more things with your, so it's like, and then obviously going from the reverse end and saying, what is the impact of the fashion industry on the world from a like a global
Every
footprint? It is
standpoint.
so bad.
It's big. It's
And
big.
and so whichever direction you want to enter, it's something that we all, I think, need to look at. How can we improve and what is sustainable? Like what choices are we making? And I think like it's actually a very cool thing that you're able to see and your industry is starting to see. Do we not need to meet in person? Or is there like, is
Yeah.
that right? I
Is
mean, a
that
lot of industries are
necessary?
seeing that. A lot of businesses are saying, oh, wait,
Yeah.
do we need to have, and it's changing. I
Do we
think,
need to
this
fly
is,
people across the
oh
country
my
or
God.
globe to show
Right.
up for a 4-hour meeting? No,
Right.
we don't.
Yeah. Right.
We can do it in an hour on
We'll
Zoom
look
and
at
we'll
it.
call it a
Right.
day.
Right. I read a book, or maybe I flipped through it years ago and I don't remember what it is, but it was a kind of a quippy business. It, I don't, God, this is going to kill me. This description, I feel so bad for the authors now that I've just butchered it, but it basically said, something to the effect of like meetings are completely unnecessary. And like anything you can do in a meeting, you could do in an email, but a meeting is taking
Yeah.
up like 20 hours because you're bringing 20 people to a meeting for 1 hour where you're just
Mm-hmm.
communicating one thing. So it was like interesting that they were like that one of the things they advocated for and that they practice in their business was doing Zoom calls, like, or doing like it was basically like we work from home. We only work 4 days a week. We don't work, we try to see those angles and see like what's the cost of this
Yeah.
workload on people, and then are
Yep.
they going to perform better if they actually have less time that they need to show up to work, and is there efficiency to be found there? So it's very exciting to hear that you found ways to get that stuff done so that you can do other things for your business and put your creativity towards other places. I think that's really fun.
It's nice to put creativity somewhere in the fashion business because
As opposed to, yeah, because it's like you're saying, it's a
it's
lot of kind of grunt
it's
work
either
and
just been
business.
commercial
Right.
or that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's not really ever been a balance between. There's like an artistic side that you have to know, but
Right.
it's commercialized. So,
Right.
but it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun to do it in a new way
Mm-hmm.
after 15 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I can imagine. And
I
I
think
mean, the cool
it's
thing too
I
is
think
like you're
it's
not
more
alone.
fun now. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone
Everyone's
is
doing it.
putting the same amount of like, we need to figure this out. So
Yeah.
that's been really cool, like seeing these different like a current affair going virtual and different obviously I know that you guys did um the flea market. Did you call it a flea market? You guys did the show that was
Oh, the
outside
upstate one?
about a
Yeah.
month ago.
Yep.
So it's like
Shout out
finding
to
ways.
Amy.
Yes, I'm a huge
Yeah,
fan.
there's a new one coming. It's up in the Hudson Valley, and we host outdoor markets at our stores as well
Okay,
this year,
cool.
starting back
Of course,
finally.
you'll have to let me know, and I'll promote. I'll come on stereo.
You promote, you
Shout at
fly up,
people.
and
Yes. Cool. Very cool. Well, we do have one comment, and I'd love to play it
well, let's play
and
it.
see what kind of winner
Oh
we got.
God, I'm scared. I don't know.
Let's see.
I've been waiting for this all night.
I know.
Hey, I was going to tell you guys I saw Rim Dip and
Okay. I don't
Sorry,
know.
I had to laugh at that one because I'm
No,
like,
I was
what
like, I
is
don't know.
that? I
I think we're
know
out. I think we're
we're
out.
too
Yeah.
old. We're too old,
Yeah.
Ellie.
We
Sorry,
don't.
we missed
No, I
that one.
literally.
I'd love to rim dip too, but
I don't know what that means, and I felt so uncomfortable. So
it's
no,
only
you'll
Wednesday.
explain off the app. Yeah.
I've got to be real.
Yeah, I'm not going to Google that. So, I will say you've given me so much of your time, and I so greatly appreciate it. And I want to just ask you like maybe one or two final questions,
Okay,
and then we can part.
I'm
Um,
ready.
okay, cool. this is kind of business and personal as well. So it's like, what is your favorite thing to buy? Like, what are maybe your favorite acquisitions that you've come across in your experience? Would be the first question.
I think they'd have to be personal things because they always
Okay.
make me the happiest. And I'm very tall and very awkward, so most vintage doesn't fit correctly.
Okay. How tall are you?
I'm 6'4".
Okay.
I have a long torso, long legs, so
Hmm.
it's like the it's rare to find a really good shirt and or a pair of overalls that work.
I
So,
saw those overalls today.
oh
Well
my God.
done.
Well, those are H&M for Lee. Thank you
Oh,
very
wow.
much. I
Okay.
know.
Okay.
They're really cute. And I
Yeah.
found them at White Plains Galleria, which is almost closed down. I
Okay.
was buying fixtures at the Macy's and found them.
Wow. So shout out
After
to White
trying,
Plains.
yeah, thank you,
Everybody go.
White
Hurry
Plains.
up and go there. Yeah.
Everyone go because it's gone in another 2 weeks.
Oh.
So run.
Oh gosh.
I was buying like store fixtures for Macy's, so
Oh
it's kind of
wow.
awful, but
Yeah. Yeah.
worked for me. They were
Right.
sold out
Right.
online. I
Oh
bought
wow.
hundreds of pairs vintage, and none of them ever fit. So,
Oh, of
but I
overalls.
will say, yeah, and I
Ah.
will say that like a good pair of vintage shoes for a size 13 foot, I'm super mega stoked about. I did always
Oh.
find that in LA at Lux DeVille on
Okay.
Sunset.
I know that
If you
place.
know
Yeah.
Oscar,
Yeah.
he used to stock big sizes, so I would always grab every single one. And
Okay.
what was the other question? Wait, did I answer that question?
Yeah, no, just
Okay.
what's your favorite treasure kind of thing. And
Um,
because there's like,
kind
yeah,
of
there's the
that sort
kind that
of
you
stuff,
buy for
and then
yourself.
like
Yeah.
just like a weird like diamond ring from some antique center in the middle of Ohio that I'm like,
Oh my
ooh, this
God,
is
it's like a
cute.
dream.
Yeah, I'm like,
That's a
oh,
whole other conversation is like jewelry and fine jewelry and
oh my god, I'm into it. So we can do
yes.
that.
Okay, cool. It sounds like we have 5 conversations lined up already. This is going great, guys.
Yeah, this is gonna actually be like
This is a
Ryan and
series.
Kelly.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's Ellie,
Yes.
Maddie, and Ellie. So we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Smiths from different misters or misses
Yes,
or whatever you call
exactly.
it. Yeah. Yeah. No relation,
Smiths.
but yeah, it's misses. That's so funny. I do appreciate because my husband obviously made me a Smith, and so we have a
Hmm.
marriage show that we do, a marriage podcast, and we call it Mr. and Mrs. Smith,
I
and
think
everyone
I've
loves
heard
to.
a little bit of it.
Yeah,
It's pretty
and
good.
everyone likes thank you, I appreciate that shout out. Everyone likes to say, oh yeah, like the Brad and Angelina movie, and I'm like, don't you know your film history? It's a Hitchcock film from the 40s, and no one does, but I'm like,
Of
that's my
course they don't.
secret, is that this is about a screwball comedy that Hitchcock did.
Exactly.
But I appreciated my segue into doing this series because I was like, this is another Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Exactly.
Of a different kind. So that was a smooth transition. My son just joined me, is hugging me like, Daddy
Hi,
never takes.
son.
Hi, I don't think he can
I have
hear
a
us.
bulldog just outside the bedroom door waiting for me.
Oh, eagerly, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the first question was like, what are your favorite treasures? And then like the other thing is I'm super curious, what is your kind of like most common price point, would you say? Like what is the range that you do most frequently in
Mm,
terms of sales?
It it's real. It depends on which segment we're talking. If I have to
Okay.
be honest, like
Oh, I don't even know what that
studio
means.
is like
Okay.
around 600 because it's design purpose and
Okay.
there's a lot of sourcing that goes into that. In
Right.
the store and or Etsy, it could be from 20 to 180. Like would be the common. So
For
there's a lot
Etsy, to
of
sell on
different.
Etsy.
Yeah, Etsy.
Yeah.
It's it's like it's usually, I don't know. I would say the average is like 200, but that's because a
Yeah.
couple like stupidly amazing things have sold. So
That's great.
they kind of push the average up. But I would say generally like around 125, 150, but it's true
And are
vintage
those
and
like
probably going to be
dresses?
killer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's
and
interesting.
killers like are coming out of the archive that I'm just
Wow.
like, somebody needs to have this. So I'm
Okay,
not,
I'm gonna need direct messages from now on.
yeah.
We're gonna get some advanced. We're gonna
any
need advanced
any
notice.
of the stuff that's like a grab and buy, where like that's gonna be in our store, and I
Yeah.
have a
Okay.
whole like room for that there. I have like a shop in the shop basically,
Okay, that's what
and
I was
and
saying earlier. Yeah.
that's like, that can go from 15 to probably, it maxes out at 100 for like a fabulous coat. Like,
Oh wow,
it's not, it's pretty,
that's really reasonable.
there's a good reach. So
Yeah, that's interesting because I think part of what I wanted to, draw attention to is like you're not just because you do archival work and that's your collection and you're in textiles and you have all these, and this immense
not
collection.
everything's
It
a
doesn't
million
mean that everything's
dollars.
$5,000.
No,
Right, right, right. And
absolutely not.
and that so that for the average person like who might listen to this after, or for people that I can tell in my audience, like they can go to your Etsy, they can make
Yeah.
an appointment to see you if they're in New York.
Yep.
And probably, right, like to again
And they
follow
can
on
comment
Instagram.
on Instagram,
Right, because you'll be
like we've
posting
been
those
saying
reels and
this
stuff like
whole
that. Yeah,
time. Yeah. So you're
yeah,
going to
for
see
sure.
tons of stuff, and not all of it is anything like insane. It's,
Okay,
it's all
right,
based on what it is. So
right.
if
It's
it's
an
a
individual garment.
wearable, just like great thing, like it'll probably be affordable because I want whoever wants it to have it. Like it shouldn't
Yeah.
be, it shouldn't be that no one can touch anything in my house. You know what I mean? Like I prefer,
I've been to
I
houses like that, and I'm like,
yeah,
I can't
we
live
all
here.
have, and it's
Yeah,
not pleasant. So
yeah.
I'd rather just have a
It's
little
just a different
something for
lifestyle.
everybody. Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
it just all
That's
kind
good
of
to know.
rolls through different channels. So certain
Yes,
things,
that makes sense.
like they are what they are. They're like,
Right.
and then
Right.
there's the stuff that, like, I get it because I know it's great stuff and I want someone to have it because it shouldn't
Right.
go into the landfill. And I let
Right.
that go for $28, and that's what it is.
Ooh,
So
that's
you know what I
great.
mean? It is what it
Oh, I
is.
totally
Like
do.
I have all these different things, but I really don't want to add to the problem of like
Right.
landfill. So
Right.
so
Yeah,
if
I
I can
think that's
keep it out
right.
and
Yeah, I
curate,
mean,
like
for
I can
sure.
do it. It's what I
Right.
do.
Right. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think there's something interesting, and I wonder, I was thinking earlier because I'm seeing a lot more articles about the fashion industry needing to be, evolve, and that the
Yeah.
consumers they're trending, everything is trending towards secondhand and vintage and thrift, and you've got brands like even like Reformation starting to do a line of vintage, and
Mm-hmm.
which I have better stuff, so if you don't, don't get me.
Exactly. Come shop us. We'll
Come
be
shop
doing
us.
our QVC show later
Yes.
tonight
We'll
at
be we'll be
11.
live
We're going on
simultaneous
live.
streaming on YouTube. You know what we can do also, there is I think a capacity to simulcast on YouTube. So that might be an evolution for
That
us
would
to
be
do like
fun.
a tag team, or like we'll
I
just do
think we
maybe
should.
Instagram live sale. Yeah. Yeah,
We're
teamwork.
doing it.
But so those were my initial questions. I think I mean I have so many more, and I feel like this always prompts like other ideas, like um
We can do this
especially around
again.
pricing, and yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So I let's play this last comment, and then we will bid you all adieu. We
Oh
really
God, is
appreciate
it
you
gonna
guys.
scare us,
No, this
Ellie?
this person is a friend of the program, so I
Oh,
think we're
okay,
fine.
good.
Yeah,
All
we're
right,
good. I approve
let's
this one.
see. Let's see.
Hello, Ellie. What is
Mm.
going on, Matt Smith?
Hey.
I've been loving the conversation. I've just been listening in, sending in taps and claps.
Yay, thank you so much.
And I've got you now followed Matt Smith on Stereo here and on Instagram. And yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about taking charge of my own fashion and my own expression. I just started kind of thrifting recently. I just went to like Buffalo
Yes,
Exchange.
Buffalo Exchange.
That's a good one.
I haven't gone to like Goodwill or anything yet, or like any swap meets or anything, so I haven't checked that out yet. But yeah, you guys have given me a lot to think about, and I love the discussion.
Awesome.
Love
That's a great
him.
one. Appreciate
So
Baser
good.
checking in. He's done
Absolutely.
a chat with my husband as well.
I found
So
him interesting. So
yeah, it's
maybe
great.
we'll
I mean, I
bring him
think
in next time.
what's great though is like, especially I think in this, what I'd call like the stereo universe, or we call it stereo streets, people don't, like I was saying earlier, like they don't necessarily have as much of an understanding of vintage, or like, we were breaking down kind of what eras or what, and you
Yeah.
know, what is the difference between, like, I always would be like, I don't sell at a swap meet. I sell at a flea market. Like
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I was like, no, I'm not selling like next to somebody who has 400 plastic sunglasses. Like that's maybe
Yeah.
something different. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just that there's a lot of, like with any industry, there's a lot of language. There's a whole
There
kind
is a
of,
lot of language.
yeah, there's what is it called? Like there's a lexicon, there's a
Yeah.
matrix. No, and it is a little like the matrix where you can fall in and end up in the wrong way.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's like, and to be able to impact people, I think on a personal level, and say like, hey, do you have a question? Then come and ask, because you've got two experts, in complementary fields, right? Or complementary
Yeah.
capacities, right, in an industry. And so it's like, I think this is a great platform, and I'm excited to do more of these talks with you. And obviously, really appreciate you taking the time
Well, I
tonight.
think we're
And
gonna do our own show from now on. You
yeah,
got
yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and then you got Mr. and Mr. and Mr. Smith. And we'll bring the kids in for the next one.
Yeah,
It'll be fun.
yeah. The dogs will bark and the kids will
Yeah.
whine.
I'll bring Frankie
And
the Old English Bulldog in for the next
oh,
round.
fantastic. Fantastic. That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you're not already following us on Stereo, please do so. And then you'll be alerted when we go on together. And if we choose to do talks with other people, that's acceptable. No,
We'll bring
you'll
in
be
a
notified.
guest from time to
Yes, yes,
time.
yes. And also, one of the features that they've added recently is moderation. So if we ever chose to do something where we brought in a third party to weigh in, we could have them just basically comment, and then I would just approve their comments alone. So there is a capacity, I think, at some point to have kind of like three people at a round table. So that could be very cool. And of course, you can find us on Instagram,
Yes.
the Grizzle, the Gram. And so please follow us there. And what else? TikTok, YouTube, whatever. We've got a lot of stuff linked. And find Matt on Etsy. My Etsy has like one piece, so don't find me there. But yeah, this has just been such a pleasure. I feel so grateful. You've really...
It's been so fun.
Oh, good. I'm so
Thank
glad.
you for having me with
my
you.
Joy. Yes.
I've enjoyed it so much.
You've been an
And
exceptional
we're going to do
co-host.
it again.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Fantastic. Well, thanks, guys, for listening. Really appreciate you joining us. And of course, if you have any questions about vintage, or you want to find out more about Matt's collection or what he does, just send him a DM, right, on Instagram.
Hit us up.
Yeah. Don't get weird, but
Right.
No.
Don't slide in too deep.
Perfect way to end.
All right.
Happy vintage shopping, guys. Have a great night. Thank you, Matt.
Have fun. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ellie.
You're welcome. My pleasure.